running on a little sleep, and I did not leave myself enough time to actually do this intro. So, episode 7 of The Insecure Musician, play the music.
Goodbye, my friend, miss you. You don't look so good again. No.
Welcome back to another episode of The Insecure Musician. I'm Maya Gomez, and I have one thing to share. If you like what you see or want to see more conversations like this, please like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out, and also then you get updated on any new content coming out. On this week's episode, we had Paul Zinay of Blackguard. He talks a lot about vocal technique, martial arts, which I found cool, and he also talks about the changes that happened when he signed a Nuclear Blast with his band. So make sure that you check this one out. He has so much to share, and he's also a good friend of mine, which is even more fun. I got to talk to a buddy. So check this one out. Here we go. Go, Paul. Cue.
Maya's record. Oh, shoot. Cool.
Now I'm recording.
Is that like a built-in feature, like right through Skype?
Yeah.
When
Oh
you
god.
his phone, is he just like, I wish Paul was here?
Yes. Yes. He's actually said that many times.
Thank God, yes.
Yeah.
I can't wait for like everything to kind of open up, just like enough to have you guys come over to Montreal, and I want to take you up to my cottage. Like it's like an hour north from Montreal, and like hang out for like a good long weekend. Like I'd love that. I'd love to just have you guys up to party. We can go for hikes together. We'll each be on either side of Corey holding his hand.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah.
I love that we share a boyfriend.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I'm so not like an interviewee. I just want to talk about like what makes people sad. Or it's so funny. I'm like, I have like my notes. And I'm like, okay, all right.
Which can all be summed up with what makes you sad.
Yeah, essentially, right? On that note.
Yeah, right.
What about music can be challenging for you? Just getting through your own mental state.
I mean, it's something that I had to wrestle with a lot more, I guess, in the late. I'm gonna call the later stages of my career, and I mean, I know like a lot of singers will be able to, they'll recognize this struggle. Is that like, I mean, there was a tour that I did a long time ago. I think it was like in 2000 and I think it was like 2011, 2012 or something like that, where I blew my voice out. And I had to, and I blew it out like right at the beginning of the tour, and then I had to like basically do an entire run without ever it being like fully healed, and that actually caused a lot of problems, like kind of for
One sec.
Yeah.
I'm losing you.
Oh,
Hold
no.
on. Internet connections.
Shady.
Okay, so
back to what makes us cry.
yes, what makes music hard for you? And I know you're mentioning about your voice.
Yeah, I mean, because I've had like a lot of vocal problems in the last couple of years, and like the hardest thing is like, especially when I was so used to being able to operate at a certain level of skill, you know, and it was no sweat. It's like I knew I could go on stage, I could be hungover, I could be dehydrated, whatever. It's like, you know, when I was 16 and starting, I could smoke a pack of cigarettes, you know, before going on stage, and I would sound amazing. I would sound better, you know, than if I didn't. And then, you know, coming with, you know, I guess it comes with age, you know, and something I've heard from other singers too. It's just like it doesn't get easier, you know, when you have to maintain the machinery that is your voice. So for me, the hardest part was adjusting was adjusting and keeping up with the maintenance with my voice. Because I've done way more shows than I care to admit where like things just weren't working and I didn't know why, you know, and it was so, I mean, not only is it aggravating, but it became like incredibly depressing, you know, after the fact, going like, sitting down and saying like, well, why is this not working anymore? Like I used to be able to do this so perfectly without ever having to think twice about it. And now like, what do I have to do? Do I have to, warm up for like 30 minutes, but not 35 minutes? Do I have to drink this much water? Do I have to do, a couple drops of CBD oil? Do I have to gargle with salt water? Like, is there like some sort of magical potion that if I'm off by a little bit in my calculations that like my voice is going to get fried or something like that, or it's just not going to show up? And, I've suffered from a lot of performance anxiety over the last couple of years, and I've been able to mitigate it. Well, my last show that I did with Blackguard was like the best vocal performance I had done in a very, very, very long time. But like I had to work so fucking hard to get back up to that level. And part of it for me too was like after Blackguard stopped touring and, I'm not rehearsing every weekend anymore and I'm not doing nearly as many shows. It's like one of my mistakes too going into it was thinking that I could perform at the same level without putting the same amount of prep time, preparation time into, adjusting my voice for the stage. All the performances I've done in the last, like, let's say 3 or 4 years was always coupled with an incredible amount of anxiety and dread, like absolute fucking dread going into the preparation, the day of the show. Actually, it was kind of, so the show the last Blackguard show that we did in January when we were opening up for Epica and the Agonist, like I was incredibly nervous going into that because it was like, okay, it was a hometown, it was our first hometown show in God knows how long, which was stressful enough as it is. And, and I prepared a lot, but I had done shows where I thought I prepared enough and, I wind up blowing my voice out or pushing too hard or doing something technically not right or whatever. It just doesn't work. So, there was no certainty going into that gig. And funny enough, one of the things that actually helped me deal with the anxiety was the fact that things were so delayed behind the scenes that, like we were set to have a sound check, but things got so delayed that we wound up having to do our sound check after Epica did their VIP meet and greet. So when we went on, we did like a quick line check, but then we had to stop. And then so they let in like 50, 60, 70 people, however many people were in their VIP, but like, let's say it was just 50. So like they let in 50 people. They didn't kick them out they didn't kick them out of the room afterwards. Like they were basically free to kind of walk around the theater. So we did our sound check in front of everybody, and that actually like completely, well, not completely, but it greatly alleviated my anxiety going into the show because like I was able to do the sound check and it's, it was like the perfect middle ground between like, rehearsing to nobody and playing in front of a full crowd was doing a sound check in front of a couple of people, like 50 people. So it kind of like, I'm like, okay, I got this, it's fine. And it, helped out a lot before I actually hit the stage, like maybe 30, 40 minutes earlier where I felt way more confident going into it. Because I've noticed too that if I'm like very overly stressed, like, there is a physical correlation that comes with that mental stress. It's one of those unfortunate real things. So I'm like having to keep myself calm before going on stage and not letting my anxieties and my fears and not letting my memories of the awful shows that had happened prior kind of take hold and ruin an opportunity, But I mean, I felt there was a lot of pressure for me and for us. I'm happy that I kind of got through it as best I did anyways.
Well, you guys took like quite a little break there for a while. And then coming back, there's definitely more pressure because people have been waiting to see you guys.
That's it. It's like we were, we want to give a certain, like, we want to give a show. We want to give like our show and the show that we knew that people were used to seeing. And I think that's also kind of like part of the, what you have to sort of sacrifice too, is that like, well, we're not, Blackguard as a band is not the same machine now as it was then. So the idea that we're going to give the exact same show is like, okay, no, we're going to give 100%. But, it's just something as silly as the fact that like, I don't have long hair anymore. My guitar player, our guitar players don't. I think like only one or two of the guys do. You know, like I remember like when we first started out and everybody had the long hair and we're all windmilling at the front. It's like, okay, well that visual isn't going to be there anymore. You know, it's a small element, but it was still like a very visually impactful thing back in the day. There's no way that like the show's going to be exactly the same 10 years or 15 years after the fact, you know? And
Yeah.
and again, kind of echoing what I said before, just like we're not the same machine. You know, we're not fresh off a tour, you know, or knee deep into a tour, going into playing Montreal and being like, oh, we're warmed up and ready to go. It's like, yeah, man, you know, we rehearse, we definitely rehearse very hard and thoroughly before going into the gig, but it's still not the same as being like battle hardened tour ready kind of thing, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. I think a lot of people struggle with even just that insecurity of like, well, we've put ourselves here, and when we're going, we're here. And sometimes we don't allow for like the growth of people. We want it to stay like what we loved about them.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Yeah, right.
We don't let the human element like just exist, where it's like, oh, it was awesome for that, but like it could be awesome for something else now, and that's totally fine. So, and it's still the same song, it's still you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
it's like, it sucks. I can't be 20. I can't be my 21-year-old self, you know, ripping it the way I did. Although I think I'm in better shape now than I was when I was 21 anyway. So.
You do mostly growl, death metal vocals, stuff like that. Have you ever branched out into other things, other kinds of vocals?
I'm actually like balls deep right now into practicing like my actual singing voice, and I've been doing it on and off for the last couple of years, but like I'd say the last like 3 or 4 months or so, because there's no Blackguard shows happening, so I don't like, if I'm not rehearsing, you know, with Blackguard for a one-off gig or something like that, at home I've been practicing like my vocal scales and sing, and more recently like really trying to heavily dive into like really singing. So like I've picked like a bunch of songs that I just try to like sing as best I can or whatever, but like that's actually something that like I'm trying to put way more focus on these days, is doing like proper singing exercises. And you know, I mean, there's so many goddamn videos on YouTube and vocal coaches that I've kind of like picked what I like and the stuff that I find works best for me, and I try to do it at like almost every day, you know, for almost every day for about like 30 between 30 minutes and an hour. I'm doing something for my voice. Actually, I've seen a lot of great sort of positive crossover with my screaming actually too. So like the more that you use this, you know, this mechanism, you know, in one regard or another, you know, the healthier your vocal cords are. So
yeah, and the better that you understand it too, right? Like using something in a different way just gives you a better understanding of how to use it in the way that you may have been possibly doing some things wrong, or just not aware of really what you're doing.
Before the show that I did in January with Blackguard, like maybe about a month prior, I actually did like I had a screaming lesson with a local guy. He's the singer for a band called Necrotic Mutation, and his name is Sébastien Croteau. He's like an amazing teacher, and like he teaches people how to growl and you know, technique. So it was really eye-opening sitting down with him and very thoroughly compartmentalizing like the parts of your voice and understanding what I'm using and how to use it better, and giving me certain exercises to be able to make my screaming stronger and whatnot. And it definitely paid off, because the show wound up going very fucking well. So like I was very pleased like by the end result of it. But yeah, I mean, the greater understanding that you have of your instrument, you know, the more complete of a musician that you're going to be, for sure. You know, yeah. And I've done singing, you know, proper singing lessons before with a teacher here named Simone Pitot. She's fantastic, and she helped me a lot to be able to identify, like, you know, some of our first lessons together was, you know, just making certain noises and identifying like the little individual parts of your vocal cords and understanding how they're moving and how to manipulate them. So it's it's super eye-opening, and it gives me more of an far more of an appreciation for singers, and way more of a hatred for every singer that's just like, oh, I just fucking go out and do it and I don't think twice about it and are amazing. To them, I say, fuck you. To all us normies that have to work on it, but then again, if you know, had I been singing, you know, at 16, I'm sure it'd be so natural that, like, you know, well, at that point it's just autopilot. You don't need to think, you don't need to overthink anything.
Yeah, well, I think that's my biggest issue is I overthink a lot of things, and that's probably why this exists. But also, when I was going through like a bunch of crazy anxiety, and like felt like I couldn't breathe. One of the things that I turned to was singing, and actually thinking about it technically, because it got me out of my mindset, and I had to think about breath and where that's coming from, and it flips your brain. And I think before you mentioned about stress and how it can really affect your voice, and coming back to that, I just thought it was interesting that, like, when I was stressed, I actually went to that and like tried to focus just on that, and it helped a lot. I stopped having panic attacks because music. So
it's music. So I mean, it was just like a mechanism for you to shift your focus away from, you know, whatever negative thoughts were kind of started spiraling at that point.
Yeah, and my anxiety causes like weird. It feels like I can't swallow.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So it was interesting. It's helped me to almost feel like it's like leaving. That feeling is just like leaving when I sing. And second of all, like just thinking about really relaxing the tongue and stuff, separating the emotion from and fear from just like how it's actually mechanically working.
Okay.
It's so strange, but it worked. So, anyways, side note, back to you.
Back to how I cry.
Yeah. So when you guys got signed to Nuclear Blast, what was the shift like for you? Was there concerns about that? Was it exciting? Did things need to change due to it? What was that shift like when that happened?
It was pretty crazy. So yeah, we signed with Nuclear Blast and Sumerian Records. It was like each label took a territory. So yeah, Nuclear Blast was in Europe, and Sumerian was in North America. And I mean, it's a weird feeling having your dream realized. like it, you know, like because every local band that wants it, you know, that like, you know, that their dream is to get signed or whatever, and all that everything that comes with it. Then it's like, you know, I remember getting the call and having the first meetings. Shit, this is really fucking happening. Like we did it. You know, we were that 1% or less than 1% that actually got to that next rung. I mean, it definitely changes your life once we start getting the tour offers, and because then, like, I mean, that's ultimately what the biggest change is just like, okay, well, your life is no longer about whatever it is, whatever you do at home and whatever routines you have there. Now it's time to settle into completely new paradigm, you know, like we had never been out for more than, you know, a week. You know, we had done like a week's run of shows or something like that, which was definitely a really good warm up, because like we already had our van, we already had our trailer, like we were already ready to go. So that was a huge, in that regard, the transition from, like, you know, doing a couple of days on the road to doing a month was like, I mean, it was drastic, but it wasn't as drastic as it could have been. We were still more prepared than other people have been. I was pretty stoked on that. You know, like we were already used to, you know, sleeping on people's floors and like sleeping in the van. Like that was fine. So now it's just like, okay, take that and then let's make it 5 times as much, you know, or 5 times longer, and let's do it multiple times in a year. So, yeah. You know, the transition was, I mean, it was so fun at the beginning that it was like, you're so grateful for the opportunity and the fact that we were out with bands that we knew, and either we knew, well, we didn't know all of them personally, obviously, but like bands that we knew, you know, we knew as big touring bands, and now all of a sudden we're part of that fraternity, and it's like, holy crap, like, yes, we're on this bill, we're on the posters with them, not as a local, but as part of the fucking tour. So, I mean, we got exactly what we wanted, and we were so happy to be there that I mean, it could have been much, much worse, and we probably would have been just as happy, but we kept everything manageable. We were already ready to sleep in the van, and that's what we did. Like, there was very little hotels or anything like that. It's like, okay, we know what it's like to sleep in the van in the Walmart parking lots, to bum couches from friends. So it was just a big wild ride. And especially at the beginning when it's all brand new and every day is a new challenge. I mean, the worst, and that too, just like the dichotomy between those two tours was so palpable. Just like, we were on such a high from the first tour that going into Summer Slaughter was like, oh fuck, like, like, this is not all of a sudden things were not going according to plan, and we're either playing to nobody and everybody there doesn't give a shit about us, or we're playing in front of a huge crowd of people that don't give a shit about us. So that's its own set of challenges, is like really playing in front of people that don't give a flying fuck about you,
Until you get used to doing that too, like, you so appreciate the stages where they do then. It's just like, even if you have that like one or two people that is just like so excited that you're there, it's like, it's so much more, you just appreciate it so much more, I think.
Funny enough about that one run, sorry to interrupt you, but like, the funniest thing about that Summer Slaughter run was the last 5 days of that tour. And I think it started off around Chicago, but like, it was like Chicago, Worcester, Toronto, Montreal, New York were so off the hook amazing that it was like, why wasn't the rest of the tour like this? Like, it was so insane. Like, the difference, like, all of a sudden, once we got to the East, like, everybody was just flipping shit. Like those shows were so crazy and good for us. We sold as much merch. That tour was 2 months long, like just shy of 2 full months. It was insane. And we sold as much merch in those 5 days than we did on the previous month and 3 quarters, almost put together.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Sure. That's it's a strange world. I'm not like, you can go to one town, it was pretty dead, and now this one, everyone's having a good time, and it's just like shifting mindset so quickly.
Yeah. Well, there's a hilarious story about who was it? I think it was Sonata Arctica, like back in the day when they were like, it's got to be like early to mid, like probably early mid 2000s. Yeah, maybe like mid 2000s or something like that. Early to mid 2000s, when they were like, well, in Montreal, power metal was so fucking big, it was stupid, like how big power metal was over here. Like, we had such a gigantic crowd for it. And I remember it was so funny seeing on their tour dates that like they were headlining, I think it was the Medley in Montreal, which was like, about 1,000 cap, give or take, or something like that, sold out. And then the next day they're playing Mavericks in Ottawa, which is maybe a 200 cap, not sold out. That's an hour and a half away, or not even, like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
when you went into this project, had you already been in other projects? And what was your entry into it? And how were you feeling about yourself at the time?
My first band was a band called Endast from Montreal, obviously. And I stepped away from them. Maybe it was like a couple of months before I joined Blackguard at the time. And joining Blackguard was actually really funny. So I was at a show at Foufoun's here in Montreal, and it was one of my favorite, like, more local, like Quebec local bands called Blinded by Faith was playing, and I was like, fuck yeah, Blinded by Faith. So I went to the show. So the lineup was actually Blinded by Faith, Unexpect, or maybe vice versa, Unexpect, Blinded by Faith, and then Blackguard under the original name Profugus Mortis was opening the show. So I got to the show, I watched them play, and I was so fucking impressed with I was like blown away. I was like, oh wow, this is really fucking cool. Oh, I actually had this is actually sort of important. I did have another band going at the time, but that sort of broke up shortly thereafter. And it turned out that like the band that I had been currently rehearsing with was literally like 3 doors down from where Blackguard was rehearsing. And the next week when I went over to rehearse, turns out we were rehearsing on the exact same day. So I saw like Terry and our guitar player and Jonathan, our old keyboard player, were like sitting out front, like in the hallway, and I was like, "Yo, fucking amazing! Like that was like sick show. Absolutely loved it." And they were like, "Oh man, thanks a lot." Said it in French. And they're like, "Hey," and then they're like, "Hey, do you know a singer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a singer." It's like, "Do you want to come jam with us?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So I literally went in. They started playing a song, and I just, made noises with my mouth, and no obvious, no lyrics, but just like blah, 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 like just figuring out like mouthing patterns and making, like showing off my and showing my range and shit like that. And then they told, the guys told me this after the fact, but like when I left, they were like, "Oh my God, we got to get that guy." So like we had exchanged contact information, and then it just kind of rolled from there. So it was weird at the same time because stylistically it was so fucking different from what I'd been doing previously, but at the same time it was so in line with a lot of the music I was listening to at the time. Like I was listening to like more folk metal, and I listened to a lot of power metal. So I'm like, okay, this is great. It's got elements of folk metal, elements of power metal, and I can still, I don't have to sing. I can scream my freaking, all I have to do is scream. Wonderful. Like, great.
And the cool thing is that you literally just took a chance. You were like, you were blown away authentically. You took the chance, and it just happened to be the right timing, right situation. And
it's crazy. Yeah.
Well, and that's like kind of one of those things where it's like, if you didn't just like trust your gut and be like, "Hey man, like that was fucking sick," then why it just wouldn't have happened. So yeah. I don't know. I love stories like that. That's super cool.
Yeah. And every time I think about how it happened, it's just like that is some crazy stars aligning shit, for me to get into it, and then everything that happened after the fact, and not, I don't want to sound like am I going to word this? Like I was able to put the CD in a lot of good hands, and that wound up like yielding a lot of contract offers, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of like, okay, like it was great that I was able to be a part of a project that was definitely good enough for me to be like, okay, like let's and be able to take advantage of the fact that I worked in college radio at the time, so I had a shit ton of like label contacts. So I'm like, all right, cool, like this project's amazing. Like boom, start sending it out, and like it was great. It's really lucky.
And it's nice when you finally get in that project where you're like, yes, I can finally like push this.
And we all had the goal. Everybody was moving in one direction, and everybody was like, that's actually like almost like a huge problem that I have every time I try to get like, sort of moving into projects nowadays, is that like it's not so in sync, and it's not like there's no goals that are getting set, and and it's a lot less quote unquote professional, I guess, just in the sense of like how the work ethic or work ethic in general, just like, okay, like if we're going to rehearse, everybody show up on time. If we're going to record, let's make sure we're ready. And why are you not doing this job? And why, like, this is your only responsibility. Why are you not doing that? It's like that problem didn't exist in Blackguard. Everybody who had a job did their job, and that's, in the end of the day, that's the only way it works, is if everybody's moving together. And you can see like the other like bands that are signed where you can tell like it's not a cohesive unit. Members drop like flies, and there's always issues that pop up, and you can tell the bands that were like, okay, they're a bunch of buds. They all like, they all like each other. They're goal orientated. They're incredibly disciplined, and those are the ones that have longevity at the end of the day.
Writing process, what's that like for you? Are you right in there writing lyrics? Does it come from like an emotional place? Is it more like fantasy? Like what is that process like? Is it mental?
I mean, I do try to insert some, like there's gotta be something personal, I suppose. Like it has to have like, it's got to come from somewhere real for the most part. I always feel a lot more satisfied with what I write when there is an emotional some sort of emotional connection to it. You know, that I don't want it to be fluff. Yeah,
No,
all the lyrics that I had that I'm the most proud of came from somewhere real and personal for me. You know, and there was a lot of lyrics in my more deathcore project Ages that like took quite a lot out that were incredibly personal. You know, talking about a looming depression and you know, myriad of, you know, the panoply of life. You know, like Ages was a vehicle for me to be able to write stuff that was a little it gave me an opportunity to write stuff that was a little more personal. There are lyrics in there that are a little all over the place that are just, you know, and sometimes more personal is just like, you know, almost blood and guts horror, you know, sort of side of things too. You know, sometimes like, you know, you want to write something that's just fucking mean, you know. So
yeah,
you
and
know,
sometimes personal, like I always think that it's interesting when I talk about personal writing versus like, you know, fictional writing or whatever. I feel like there's some like line there where it's like, why can't something fictional also dive into the personal a little bit? Like it's like,
well, yeah, because
it may not be what I've been through, but maybe what I want to experience or what could be experienced, or, you know, there's also that, or something that I'll never experience that I think would be interesting. And that doesn't mean that it's, it's not as authentic.
And I totally agree with you. And with the last Blackguard record, Storm, I mean, that is a concept record. So it follows a character who loses his entire family and his whole way of life, and it you know, and it delves into that pain and that sorrow, you know. And although I haven't firsthand, you know, I haven't experienced that necessarily, but at the same time, like, you know, as a writer, you know, when you're writing these lyrics and you have to mentally put yourself into that scenario, you know, and you have to try to imagine what it's like to be there, you know, and you do your best to kind of write words to it to describe something harrowing, you know. And, you know, it can get very scary and very emotional, you know, when you try to put, you know, if you're too good at putting yourself in that situation, then it's just like, okay, might get too dark and too real, you know.
Yeah, and it's a really creative place to sit.
Yeah,
that's cool. Super cool.
But that's it, and you have to have a very malleable imagination, you know, to be able to try to imagine these scenarios that you haven't necessarily been a part of, but you're trying to express, and you want to do it in a very authentic way as best you can. You know, you don't want to put around something that's so that, you know, serious topics, you know, like if that's what you want to, even again, like even as in fiction, you know, if it didn't happen to you, you can still imagine it. Performing
lyrics that I don't like, for me anyway, my biggest struggle is performing lyrics that somebody else has written for me.
Yeah.
I did that in a previous project, and I was just like, I'm having a hard time connecting to this only because it doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it was the writing. I don't know.
When I first joined up with the guys from Ages, because it had previously been under kind of like a different name, but the band didn't really launch, so they had a couple of songs with lyrics that were written by Gabriel McCary, who was the original singer for Ion Dissonance. He is an amazing lyricist and an amazing singer, so I felt very honored to actually be singing those songs in his words. He's such a great lyricist that it was, I didn't necessarily feel a disconnect because it wasn't my words, but it's not something I'd want to do a lot, you know, like that was a good experience, and I'm really happy for it. And I've always wondered like what it would be like if I had joined a band that had like an extensive back catalog, you know, like Crimson Shadows that I was a part of for a half a second. So yeah, but those lyrics were fun, and it was like, and I, you know, those were fantasy based stories, and it was cool. It was a very cool thing to sing on. So
yeah, and you connect with it. I think that's the thing too. I think that's a little different, right? Like you had fun with it, and you connected to it, and you like it, so that helps, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. it always helps if you connect with it. What is one thing that you wish that you would have taken up in music that you just haven't, or that you didn't, or that you think would make you more well-rounded, other than just your clean vocals that we talked about before?
Yeah, I definitely wish I kept going. I'd started that way earlier. Because I play a little bit of drums, and I play a little bit of bass. I play a little bit of guitar. And like every once in a while, I'll be like, I want to learn some blues riffs on guitar. Or you know, if I go to the Blackguard rehearsal space and I get behind get behind Justine's drum kit, I'm surprised how, like, I'm still pretty decent at drums. And like I still kind of possess like a lot of the dexterity for it. So I'm like, after a couple, like I have so much fun playing drums. Just a certain level of performing ability with drums would have been fun. I think at this point, what I really feel like I should do, and that I again wish that I had done a little earlier, is like just basic music theory. Just learning how chords and notes come together and how to write a song and everything like that. And I've kind of like dipped my toe into that every once in a while. But like, if you're, no matter what instrument you play, like learning theory in one respect or another is going to benefit you, whether or not you're a singer, a bass player, keyboard, blah, 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 blah. That's it. You're doing like you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't, try to at least try to learn it, or have like some sort of basic comprehension of that.
Yeah, and pushing yourself in any respect, right? Like I feel like that's one thing that I love about music too, is I for how much you succeed, like there's so much more you can like try and accomplish and look at, and so I think that's one of those super cool things about it. It can also cause a lot of anxiety. Yeah. So it's
like every time I've ever tried to be like, I'm going to start learning some theory, and I've delved a little bit into it, and it's like, it gets overwhelming really fucking fast. Yeah, and it doesn't get easier the older you get and the more responsibilities you have, and you're like, how much time can I possibly dedicate to this? And I mean, it's like, okay, just make small, like if you really, really decide that you're going to learn some theory or whatever it is you want to take up, it's like, just do it consistently, even if it's for 10, 15 minutes a day, just that's it. Make it manageable, Yeah. And like, that's something that I always, like in my life in general, that I always get caught up, is whenever I try to tackle something new, I wind up trying to do too much, where, oh, I want to sing, and then I'm going to play a little bit of guitar, but then I got to work out for an hour, but then I want to, and then I got to practice boxing. It's just like, okay, like for me, the last year or so has been like really trying to simplify my life into like, okay, what do I really, really, really want to do? What do I want to try to start excelling at more? And really don't try to clutter my life up with much more than that. That's it. Like, don't get so, the moral of the story is like, don't get bogged down trying to like tackle too many things at a time. But Jesus Christ, like if you decide you want to do something, if you want to prioritize something in your life, small, incremental, every day, 10 minutes, whatever. But it's easy to get too overwhelmed, and if you're starting a journey, like just look at the step in front of you. Don't look at, how high you have to go. Something I was very scared to undertake about a year and a half ago was Muay Thai. So Muay Thai kickboxing. And that was fucking terrifying. Not at first, because hitting pads is fine. First time I actually got into the ring and sparred with somebody who was trying to hurt me, that was something else. Really, one of the main reasons I wanted to do Muay Thai too, and get into a martial arts, and especially one where I was going to force myself to spar, is that I really wanted to learn how to be very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I felt that it was a very positive growing experience, especially when you're fighting against somebody that's so much better than you, and you're like, I'm not winning this fight, or this sparring match. Like, they're just going to take it easy on me. And when they decide to turn it on, it's over. But learning how to keep calm under pressure is something that really needs to be practiced. You know, like if you never put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you are going to be you are not going to be able to deal with being in an uncomfortable situation. So I had two big things happen in my life, or two. Well, one was getting into Muay Thai, and the other was starting to work for Eventco, which is the one of the bigger production companies in Montreal. So I was a production manager for big concerts and stuff. And I have never in my life been so stressed out than either being in the ring or dealing with booking agents and tour managers and then artists on the day of the show, especially for the first couple of times that I was doing it. And I really have Muay Thai to thank for how I was able to I was very pleased with I was super happy with myself. I was able to, like, the first couple shows I did were these after parties for the Osheaga Festival in Montreal. And I was freaking out I was mentally, I was kind of freaking out, but I was sort of keeping it calm. And like things went wrong, and I could see in my mind's eye, you know, the alternative universe Paul, you know, breaking down, crying, and not being able to deal with the stress. And I was happy that I wasn't living that that alternative universe. That I was like, okay, no, this is Paul. That's like, okay. First and foremost, stressing out solves nothing, and stressing out and freaking out will not solve the issue ever. So it's like, okay, let's stay calm, breathe, think clearly, and, you know, take it, you know, in a stressful situation at work or in life, just being able to, you know, center yourself for that second, take a deep breath and go, okay, you know, what's the first step to fixing this? So
Yeah.
does that answer your question? I don't know. I think that had something to do with the question.
Yeah. No, it worked. It's fine.
I kind of feel like I went off on a tangent. I'm just like,
No, but I feel like no, it was good because it allows you to kind of like separate the like stress feelings and like the immediate reaction with like just focusing on the task at hand, going back to logic.
That's it.
Right. And like for me, I think about all the things at once. And yeah, so coming back to logic can sometimes just be super helpful and not duh. Also great, but not worth it.
The last couple of years has been like very rewarding for me because I've seen how much I've grown and how I handle stress now versus how I handle stress and anxiety before, you know, and I'm definitely a better person now for it, you know, for letting people tee off on me and punch and kick me. It's like, yeah, it was good. It helped me grow.
Was needed.
It was needed. I recommend it. I recommend it for anybody. Go get your ass kicked and understand what real stress is like, and then everything else, all the other problems in life melt away after that. They're less important. Yeah.
I'm gonna go get punched in the face now. I'll be back. I'm just kidding. All right. Well, thank you for being on this, and I can't wait to share it with people.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me to be a part of it.
Oh.